The sterile air of Aurelia Station carried a hint of ozone, a ubiquitous reminder that they existed in the vacuum of space, suspended between two warring civilizations. Asher Thompson adjusted his formal diplomatic attire, the austere blue uniform of the Earth Alliance pressing uncomfortably against his shoulders. As an anthropologist and xenobiologist, he was more accustomed to field research garb than ceremonial dress. But today demanded protocol. "Remember," Director Hamilton whispered beside him, "you're merely facilitating communication. Don't interject yourself into their affairs. The Kronar-Zephyrian conflict has raged for over 1,000 years. Your job is simply to prevent them from killing each other during these talks." Asher nodded, though inwardly he bristled at the limitation. The Earth Alliance had selected him precisely because of his unique insights into cultural miscommunications. If anyone could identify the underlying causes of this millennium-long conflict, it would be him. The grand negotiation hall stood before them, its vaulted ceiling designed to accommodate the towering Kronar delegates. The room was divided by a long obsidian table, polished to mirror-like perfection. On one side would sit the Kronar delegation, warriors whose culture revolved around battle prowess and physical sacrifice. On the other, the Zephyrian contingent, a species whose bioluminescent bodies and spiritual practices had evolved alongside their reverence for visual connection. "They're arriving!" Hamilton tensed as the doors at opposite ends of the hall slid open. The Kronar entered first, their heavy footfalls echoing against the metallic floor. Ambassador Grimjaw led them, his enormous frame covered in a tapestry of ritual scars that glinted under the artificial light. Each mark told a story of battle, sacrifice, and honor, a living history book of his service to his people. General Bloodmark followed close behind, his body bearing even more extensive scarification, the mark of his higher military rank. From the opposite doorway emerged the Zephyrian delegation. They seemed to float rather than walk, their movements fluid and graceful. High Priestess Seraphine led them, her skin emitting a soft blue glow that pulsed gently with her breathing. Behind her walked Princess Liesel and her younger sister, Princess Kira, daughters of Emperor Vorak. The Zephyrian royal family's skin shimmered with a more intense luminescence than their counterparts, indicating their pure bloodline. Asher took his position at the head of the table. "Distinguished representatives of the Kronar and Zephyrian civilizations, I welcome you to this historic peace negotiation. I am Asher Thompson, xenobiologist and anthropologist of the Earth Alliance, appointed as your mediator." The formalities proceeded with tense politeness. Each side recited their grievances, territorial disputes, resource conflicts, military incursions. Yet Asher noted how these complaints lacked the passion one would expect from grievances worthy of a 1,000-year war. Something deeper lay beneath the surface, something neither side was explicitly addressing. Then it happened. Princess Liesel, while addressing a point about shared space stations, looked directly at Ambassador Grimjaw. The Kronar diplomat slammed his massive fist onto the table, causing the entire structure to shudder. "How dare you!" he bellowed, rising to his full height. "Such blatant disrespect will not be tolerated." Confusion rippled through the human delegation, but the Zephyrians immediately tensed, their skin flashing from serene blue to alarmed indigo. "Ambassador Grimjaw has committed the great transgression," High Priestess Seraphine declared, her voice trembling with rage. "This meeting is over. We cannot negotiate with those who mock our most sacred values." The Zephyrian delegation rose as one, preparing to depart. "Wait," Asher interjected, stepping between the groups. "Please, there's clearly been a misunderstanding. Ambassador Grimjaw, what exactly has offended you?" The scarred diplomat's face contorted with barely contained fury. "The princess dared to look directly upon my battle honors with her untested eyes. It is the highest form of disrespect to gaze upon a warrior's scars without having earned the right." Asher turned to Princess Liesel, whose bioluminescent patterns had shifted to a deep indigo of distress. "Princess, would you explain your perspective?" "I offered him the sacred site," she said, her voice barely audible. "The highest honor one Zephyrian can bestow upon another is to share vision, to truly see one another. I was attempting to bridge our differences by offering what we consider our most precious gift." In that moment, Asher understood. This wasn't merely a cultural misunderstanding. It was the very foundation of their 1,000-year conflict. Two species, two completely contradictory interpretations of the same action. "Please," he addressed both parties. "I believe I may have identified a fundamental miscommunication. Would you grant me time to investigate the cultural contexts before we abandon these talks?" After tense deliberation, both sides agreed to a 24-hour recess. As they filed out, Asher noticed how carefully the Zephyrians kept their eyes lowered, while the Kronar proudly displayed their scarification, interpreting the averted Zephyrian gazes as further insult. This would require more than standard diplomatic protocol. Asher would need to immerse himself in both cultures, and quickly. His first stop was the Kronar training facility on the lower deck of Aurelia Station. The gravity was set slightly higher here, accommodating the Kronar preference for resistance training. The air smelled of metal and exertion. Asher arrived to witness what appeared to be a ritual confrontation between two Kronar warriors. They stood facing each other, displaying their scars prominently, fingers tracing the ridges on their counterpart's body, while reciting what sounded like battle histories. "The Scar Duel," came a deep voice behind him. General Bloodmark had entered silently for such a massive being. "You wish to understand our ways, human?" "I do," Asher replied, maintaining eye contact but careful not to look at the general's extensive scarification. "I believe misunderstood cultural values lie at the heart of this conflict." Bloodmark grunted. "Follow me." The general led Asher to a private chamber, where the walls were adorned with holographic displays of ancient Kronar warriors, each bearing more elaborate scarification than the last. "Our scars are our history, our honor, our very souls," Bloodmark explained, activating a holographic display showing the ritual scarification process. "Each mark represents a battle fought not for personal glory, but for the protection of others. We do not celebrate violence, we celebrate sacrifice." Asher watched as the hologram showed a young Kronar warrior receiving a ritual scar after saving fellow soldiers in battle. When we display our scars, we are saying, "I have bled for my people. I have suffered to protect what matters." To look upon another's scars without acknowledgement of their sacrifice is to dismiss their pain as meaningless. "And the Zephyrians?" Asher prompted. Bloodmark's expression darkened. "They hide their eyes from our honors, treating our sacred sacrifices as obscenities. They refuse to acknowledge the price we've paid for survival." Asher nodded thoughtfully. "Thank you for sharing this, General. I need to understand the Zephyrian perspective as well." "Be careful, human," Bloodmark warned. "Their ways are unsettling." Asher next sought out the Zephyrian meditation chamber. Unlike the utilitarian Kronar facilities, the Zephyrian space was transformed into something organic. The ceiling pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that seemed almost alive, responding to the emotional states of those below. Soft, ethereal sounds permeated the air, creating harmonies that shifted with the light displays. High Priestess Seraphine sat cross-legged in the center, her eyes closed in meditation. When Asher entered, she opened them slowly, her pupils dilating to adjust to his presence. "You seek understanding," she stated, rather than asked. "Yes, High Priestess. I believe I've discovered the root of the conflict between your peoples, but I need to confirm my theory." She gestured for him to sit across from her. "The sacred site is at the core of Zephyrian existence. Through our eyes, we connect with the universe and with each other. When we look upon another being, We are not merely seeing their physical form, but connecting with their spiritual essence. She reached forward, placing her fingertips gently on Asher's temples. May I demonstrate? At his nod, she locked eyes with him. The experience was unlike anything he'd felt before, a sensation of warmth spreading from his eyes throughout his body, as if something was flowing between them. This is a simplified version of our sacred site, she explained, breaking the connection. Between Zephyrians, it is much deeper, a true melding of souls. It is our most intimate, most sacred act. And the Kronar? Asher asked. Her luminescence dimmed slightly. They celebrate mutilation and violence. They carve their flesh as trophies of destruction. To gaze upon such desecration of the body is painful to us. It violates our belief in the sanctity of form. Yet they demand we look upon their scars, as if forcing us to celebrate their barbarism. Asher carefully noted the disgust in her voice when speaking of scars. Thank you for sharing this perspective, High Priestess. Back in his quarters, Asher accessed the station's historical archives. He searched for the earliest recorded interactions between the Kronar and Zephyrian civilizations, scrolling through thousands of documents until he found what he was looking for. The first diplomatic meeting between the species, over 1,000 years ago. The footage was grainy and partially corrupted, but clear enough to confirm his suspicions. Ambassador Korth of the Zephyrians had offered the sacred site to Princess Saravia of the Kronar during first contact. The Kronar had interpreted this as an insult to the princess's battle scars. The meeting had devolved into accusations and threats. In the next recorded interaction, the Zephyrians had sent unblemished, luminous ones as representatives, their most revered spiritual leaders who bore no marks or imperfections. The Kronar had perceived this as an attempt to shame them by contrasting their scarred bodies with the pristine Zephyrian forms. From that point forward, every interaction had been tainted by these initial misunderstandings. What had begun as a cultural miscommunication had spiraled into a 1,000-year war that had cost billions of lives. Asher rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of this discovery. The conflict had never been about territory or resources. It was about scars and sight, about fundamentally opposing interpretations of the same actions. The next morning, the delegations reconvened in the negotiation hall. Tension hung in the air like a physical presence. Before we continue, Asher began, I would like to share what I've learned about the origins of your conflict. He described his findings, explaining how the sacred site of the Zephyrians had been misinterpreted by the Kronar, and how the Kronar's proud display of their scars had been perceived as glorifying violence by the Zephyrians. Ambassador Grimjaw, Asher said, deliberately maintaining eye contact with the Kronar diplomat. In human culture, direct eye contact is a sign of respect and honesty. When I look at you, I am not judging your scars or dismissing your sacrifices. I am acknowledging you as an equal worthy of my full attention. He turned to High Priestess Seraphine. Similarly, when I look upon you, I am not attempting to impose a spiritual connection or invade your privacy. I am simply showing that I value your presence and your words. Asher then did something unexpected. He rolled up his sleeve to reveal a long scar on his forearm. I received this during an expedition on Proxima Centauri b, when I placed myself between a fellow researcher and a predatory species. To the Kronar, this would be a mark of honor, evidence that I was willing to sacrifice for others. To the Zephyrians, this might appear as a distressing disfigurement. Both interpretations come from deeply held cultural values, yet neither is inherently right or wrong. Ambassador Grimjaw leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. You suggest our entire war is based on misunderstanding. I believe so. Asher nodded. Ambassador, would you be willing to explain the significance of one of your scars to the Zephyrian delegation, not as a challenge, but as a cultural exchange? After a moment's hesitation, Grimjaw stood and pointed to a prominent scar that ran from his shoulder to his chest. "This I earned protecting a nursery ship during the Nebula siege. 300 younglings lived because I stood between them and plasma fire." The Zephyrians shifted uncomfortably, but Princess Liesel spoke up. "You risked yourself for children?" "Of course," Grimjaw replied, seeming surprised by the question. "What warrior would not?" "Among our people," Liesel explained, "those who protect children are granted the honor of the luminous blessing, a sacred ceremony where their lifelight is strengthened." She hesitated. "It is not unlike the honor your people bestow through scarification." A moment of recognition passed between them, perhaps the first genuine understanding in a millennium of conflict. The meeting progressed with cautious optimism. Both sides agreed to continue cultural exchanges under Asher's guidance. But as they prepared to adjourn for the day, an alarming sound pierced the air. The station's security alert. A hooded figure burst through the door, brandishing what appeared to be an energy weapon. Before security could react, the assailant fired directly at Asher. Time seemed to slow. Ambassador Grimjaw lunged forward, attempting to shield Asher, but was too far away. It was Princess Liesel who reached him first, throwing herself partially in front of him. The blast caught them both, sending them crashing to the floor as security neutralized the attacker. Chaos erupted. Medical teams rushed in while security secured the area. Asher, dazed and injured but conscious, looked up to see Kronar and Zephyrian delegates working side by side to assist the wounded. Princess Liesel lay beside him, her bioluminescence flickering weakly as she pressed her hand against his wound, her own injury apparent by the dimming light across her abdomen. "Why?" Asher managed to ask her. Her eyes, typically averted from direct contact with strangers, met his directly. "Because peace is worth bleeding for," she whispered, before medical staff separated them for treatment. The assassination attempt had an unexpected effect. As Asher recovered in the station's medical bay, he learned that Kronar and Zephyrian security forces had begun cooperating, conducting joint investigations to determine who had ordered the attack. Kronar warriors stood guard outside the medical facilities, while Zephyrian healers worked alongside human doctors to treat the wounded. On the third day of his recovery, Asher received visitors, Ambassador Grimjaw and High Priestess Seraphine, entering together without the previous tension between them. The would-be assassin was a mercenary, Grimjaw reported, hired by extremist factions from both our worlds who prefer war to understanding. "Your intervention has disrupted 1,000 years of hatred," Seraphine added. "That makes you dangerous to those who profit from our conflict." Asher sat up, wincing slightly. "How is Princess Liesel?" "Recovering well," Seraphine answered. "Her actions have challenged many of our preconceptions about humans and about sacrifice." Grimjaw nodded solemnly. "She bears a wound received in the protection of another. Among my people, such a mark would be considered a badge of the highest honor." "And among mine," Seraphine said quietly, "to risk one's lifelight for peace is the most sacred act possible." Something had fundamentally shifted. The assassination attempt had given both sides a common enemy, and, more importantly, had forced them to see each other as allies rather than adversaries. When Asher was finally released from medical care, he made a startling confession to Director Hamilton. The assassination attempt was staged, he admitted, in the privacy of Hamilton's office. "What?" Hamilton nearly shouted. "You risked an interstellar incident, not to mention lives." "No actual lives were at risk," Asher interrupted. "The assassin was an Alliance operative with a modified stunner designed to cause superficial injuries. I needed to create a situation where both sides would be forced to cooperate, to see each other as potential allies, rather than inherent enemies." "You had no authorization for this," Hamilton said coldly. "And I would have received none had I asked," Asher countered. "But look at the results. For the first time in a millennium, Kronar and Zephyrian representatives are talking directly, working together. The foundation for peace has been laid. Hamilton stared at him for a long moment. I should have you court-martialed. You should, Asher agreed. But you won't, because it worked. And because we both know that 1,000 more years of diplomatic protocols wouldn't have achieved what one moment of shared crisis did. The peace negotiations resumed with a markedly different atmosphere. Where before, there had been rigid formality and barely concealed hostility. Now, there was cautious but genuine curiosity. Both delegations had requested Asher's continued involvement, despite Hamilton's reservations. I propose a cultural exchange, Asher suggested during the fourth session. Not merely discussions, but active participation in each other's traditions. The room fell silent. Such a proposal was unprecedented. What exactly do you suggest? Seraphine asked carefully. I propose that a Zephyrian volunteer participate in a modified Kronar scarification ritual, and that a Kronar volunteer participate in a Zephyrian sacred site ceremony. Murmurs of shock rippled through both delegations. Impossible, General Bloodmark declared. Our scarification rituals are only for those who have earned them in battle. And the sacred site is not for outsiders, added a Zephyrian elder. It would be sacrilege. Then, perhaps we are not ready for true peace, Asher said quietly. Peace requires more than cessation of hostilities. It demands understanding, even when that understanding is uncomfortable. The delegations disbanded to consider the proposal, leaving Asher uncertain whether he had pushed too far. That evening, Princess Liesel requested a private meeting with him. They met in one of the station's observation decks, surrounded by the vast starfield. Her luminescence had fully recovered, glowing with a soft blue that complemented the stellar backdrop. You've asked for the impossible, she said without preamble. I've asked for a demonstration of commitment, Asher replied. Your people and the Kronar have spent a millennium killing each other over misunderstandings. Breaking that cycle requires more than words. She moved closer, her light creating dancing patterns on the metallic walls. You truly believe peace is possible? I do. Your actions during the assassination attempt proved it. When crisis came, you didn't see a human or an outsider. You saw someone worth protecting. And if I told you my reasons were not entirely diplomatic? She asked. Her luminescence shifting to a deeper, more intense blue. Asher felt his pulse quicken. Princess! Liesel, she corrected him. When we are alone, I am simply Liesel. Liesel, he amended. Whatever your reasons, they led to a breakthrough. For the first time, Kronar and Zephyrian representatives are seeing each other as people rather than enemies. She studied him with an intensity that made him acutely aware of the Zephyrian belief in the sacred site. I will volunteer, she said finally. I will undergo the Kronar ritual. That's not necessary, Asher protested. I merely suggested, if we ask others to take risks for peace, we must be willing to do the same. Her resolve was evident in the steady glow of her bioluminescence. But I have a condition. Name it. You must be present throughout the entire ritual. The next day, Princess Liesel's announcement stunned both delegations. More shocking still was Ambassador Grimjaw's reciprocal offer to participate in the sacred site ceremony with High Priestess Seraphine. This is unprecedented, Hamilton whispered to Asher as the delegations debated the proposals. And potentially disastrous, if either ritual goes wrong. It won't, Asher assured him, though his own anxiety was mounting. Both sides understand the stakes. Princess Kira, who had remained largely silent throughout the negotiations, suddenly spoke up. It should be me, not my sister. All eyes turned to the younger princess. Liesel is heir to the throne, Kira explained. If something were to go wrong, she left the implication hanging. Besides, I have always been curious about Kronar traditions, their endurance, their fortitude. These are qualities we Zephyrians could learn from. After much deliberation, it was agreed. Princess Kira would undergo a modified Kronar scarification ritual, and Ambassador Grimjaw would participate in the sacred site with High Priestess Seraphine. The ceremonies would take place simultaneously the following day, with representatives from both species present as witnesses. That night, Asher could not sleep. He paced his quarters, plagued by doubts. Had he pushed too hard? Was he risking the princess's safety, not to mention the fragile peace process? And what of his growing feelings for Lyselle? Were they compromising his judgment? Morning arrived too quickly. The Kronar ritual would take place in their training facility, modified to accommodate Zephyrian observers. The sacred site ceremony would follow in the Zephyrian meditation chamber. Princess Kira arrived dressed in traditional Zephyrian robes, her luminescence steady, despite what must have been considerable apprehension. General Bloodmark would perform the ritual himself, a sign of the importance the Kronar placed on this exchange. The scar will be small, Bloodmark explained to the assembly, placed on the upper arm where it can be displayed or concealed according to the princess's preference. It will symbolize not battle, but courage, the courage to bridge our differences. Asher stood beside Lyselle, acutely aware of her tension as her sister prepared for the ritual. "She'll be fine," he whispered reassuringly. "It's not the pain I fear for her," Lyselle replied. "It's what this means for our traditions. For 1,000 years, we have seen physical perfection as spiritual purity." The ritual began. Bloodmark prepared a ceremonial blade, its edge gleaming under the lights. He spoke in the Kronar language, a series of guttural sounds that the translation devices rendered as a poem about sacrifice and honor. Princess Kira knelt, exposing her arm. Her luminescence flickered, but remained steady as Bloodmark made a precise incision. She did not flinch, though Asher noticed several Zephyrian observers turning away. Bloodmark then applied a mixture to the wound, a healing agent that would ensure scarification without infection. "This mark signifies courage beyond battle," he declared. "It honors one who bled not for war, but for peace." When it was done, Princess Kira rose, examining the small, already healing scar on her arm. Rather than disgust, her expression showed fascination. "It feels significant," she said, surprising everyone. "A physical reminder of commitment." The tension in the room noticeably decreased. Even the most conservative Zephyrians seemed moved by the princess's acceptance of the ritual. They proceeded to the Zephyrian meditation chamber for the sacred site ceremony. Ambassador Grimjaw appeared distinctly uncomfortable in the organic environment, his massive frame seemingly out of place among the flowing, luminescent decorations. High Priestess Seraphine prepared the chamber, activating bioluminescent patterns across the ceiling that pulsed in rhythm with soft, ethereal music. "The sacred site is not merely seeing," she explained to the Kronar observers. "It is connecting, understanding at a level beyond words." Grimjaw knelt before her, clearly struggling with the vulnerable position. For a warrior culture that valued physical strength, this spiritual surrender must have been extraordinarily difficult. "Open your eyes fully," Seraphine instructed. "Do not look away, no matter what you feel." She placed her hands on either side of Grimjaw's face, then locked eyes with him. The chamber's lights dimmed, focusing attention on the glow emanating from the High Priestess. For several minutes, they remained connected in this visual embrace, the ambassador's initial discomfort giving way to what appeared to be awe. When they finally broke contact, Grimjaw seemed disoriented. "I saw," he said simply, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. "Not just with eyes, but with—" He struggled to find the words. "With soul," Seraphine completed for him. "You have honored our tradition, Ambassador. Few outsiders have ever been granted the sacred site. The dual ceremonies had achieved what years of negotiation could not: genuine cultural exchange and the beginning of mutual respect. In the days that followed, the peace talks progressed rapidly. Territorial disputes that had seemed insurmountable were resolved with surprising ease. Resource-sharing agreements were drafted and approved. Emperor Vorak himself arrived at Aurelia Station for the signing of the formal peace treaty. His presence elevated the event from a diplomatic achievement to a historic turning point. The Grand Hall was filled not just with Kronar and Zephyrian delegates, but with representatives from dozens of species throughout the galaxy, all witnesses to what many had thought impossible. Asher, standing with the Earth Alliance delegation, felt a profound sense of accomplishment as Emperor Vorak and the Kronar High Commander signed the treaty. 1,000 years of war ended because two cultures had finally begun to understand each other. The celebration that followed was a blend of traditions. Kronar warriors performed ritual combat displays, their movements precise and powerful, while Zephyrian luminaries created breathtaking light performances that transformed the hall into a living canvas of color and emotion. As the festivities continued, Emperor Vorak approached Asher, accompanied by his daughters. "Anthropologist Thompson," he said formally, "your contribution to this peace cannot be overstated." Asher bowed respectfully. "The credit belongs to those who were willing to question their assumptions. Your Majesty, I merely facilitated the conversation." "You did far more than that," the Emperor countered. "You risked your life, challenged millennia of tradition, and showed both our peoples a path forward." He glanced at Princess Lucelle, whose luminescence had brightened noticeably in Asher's presence. "Such service deserves recognition and reward. Seeing peace between your peoples is reward enough. Your Majesty." The Emperor's bioluminescence pulsed with what Asher had come to recognize as amusement. "Perhaps, but tradition demands more tangible acknowledgement." He gestured to his daughters. "In accordance with Zephyrian custom, I offer you the honor of partnership with one of my daughters. Such a union would strengthen the bonds between our peoples and ensure that the architect of our peace remains connected to our future." Asher froze, momentarily speechless. He looked from the Emperor to Princess Liesel, whose luminescence had intensified to a brilliant blue that betrayed her emotion. "Your Majesty, This is unexpected," Asher managed. "On Earth, we typically allow individuals to form such bonds based on mutual attraction rather than diplomatic considerations." "And is there no such attraction present?" the Emperor asked, his knowing gaze shifting between Asher and Liesel. Before Asher could respond, Princess Liesel stepped forward. "Father, if I may speak." At the Emperor's nod, she continued, her voice steady despite her brightening luminescence. "The Earth custom has merit. While I would be honored by such a union, it should arise from mutual desire, not obligation." "And does such desire exist?" the Emperor pressed. Liesel's gaze met Asher's, a deliberate invocation of the sacred site that sent warmth spreading through him. "Yes," she said simply. "Then it seems we have the foundation for both a personal and political alliance," Emperor Vorak declared. "Assuming anthropologist Thompson shares this mutual desire." All eyes turned to Asher. In that moment, he thought of Director Hamilton's inevitable objections, of the complications this would create for his career, of the cultural adjustments such a union would require. Then he looked at Liesel, remembering how she had thrown herself in front of him during the assassination attempt, how they had connected during their private conversations, how her luminescence always brightened in his presence. "I do," he said firmly, "though I would request that any formal union respect both Zephyrian and human traditions." The Emperor's bioluminescence pulsed with approval. "So it shall be, a new tradition for a new era of peace." The union of Asher Thompson and Princess Liesel was scheduled for the final day of the peace conference. It would incorporate elements of Zephyrian ceremony, Kronar ritual, and human tradition, a physical manifestation of the cultural bridge they had all worked to build. The night before the ceremony, Asher stood alone on the observation deck, watching the stars. The magnitude of what had transpired, and what was about to occur, weighed heavily on him. Having doubts, came Liesel's voice from behind him. She joined him at the viewport, her luminescence casting gentle blue patterns across the transparent aluminum. "Not about us," he assured her, "but about everything else. I came here as a mediator, not expecting to become so personally invested." She took his hand, her skin slightly warmer than human norm, pulsing subtly with her heartbeat. "Would you change anything?" Asher considered the question. No, he finally decided. Though I suspect Director Hamilton would have preferred a less complicated resolution. "Hamilton sees only policy," Liesel observed. "You saw people, our fears, our pride, our potential for understanding. That's why you succeeded where 1,000 years of traditional diplomacy failed." "And now I'm about to marry a princess from another species," Asher said with a small laugh. "Definitely not in the Earth Alliance diplomatic handbook." "Perhaps it should be," she suggested, her luminescence shifting to the deeper blue that indicated humor. "The most lasting peace comes from genuine connection, not merely signed treaties." The ceremony itself exceeded all expectations. Held in a chamber specially designed to accommodate both species' needs, it blended the sacred site of the Zephyrians with a modified version of the Kronar bonding ritual, followed by a human exchange of vows. Ambassador Grimjaw himself performed the Kronar portion, presenting Asher and Liesel with matching ceremonial marks, not scars, but intricate designs applied with bioluminescent ink that complemented Liesel's natural glow while honoring Kronar tradition. High Priestess Seraphine led them through the sacred site, a public version of the intimate visual connection that formed the core of Zephyrian bonding. As they gazed into each other's eyes, the chamber's lights dimmed, highlighting the connection between them. Director Hamilton, despite his reservations, represented Earth in the ceremony, leading them through vows adapted from various human cultures, emphasizing commitment, partnership, and mutual respect. When it was complete, representatives from all three species declared the union recognized under their respective laws. The applause that followed was not merely for the couple, but for what they represented: the possibility of understanding across seemingly insurmountable differences. 3 months later, Asher and Liesel departed Aurelia Station aboard a specially designed diplomatic vessel. Their mission: to serve as cultural ambassadors throughout the galaxy, using the lessons from the Kronar Zephyrian peace process to help resolve conflicts between other species. As their ship pulled away from the station, Asher stood with his wife on the bridge, watching Aurelius diminish against the backdrop of stars. Once a fragile outpost between warring civilizations, it had transformed into a thriving hub of cultural exchange and cooperation. "Do you think it will last?" Liesel asked, her luminescence creating gentle patterns across the command console. "The peace? I do," Asher replied, taking her hand. "Not because of treaties or political advantages, but because both sides finally understand each other. They've learned to see value in their differences, rather than threat." Through the view screen, they could see ships from both civilizations moving freely around the station. Kronar military vessels now serving as protection rather than threat. Zephyrian artistic ships creating stunning light displays that complemented the station's architecture. "We should name our approach," Liesel suggested. "The process you developed deserves recognition." Asher considered for a moment. "The Thompson Protocol sounds too formal. Perhaps simply cultural bridge building." "I prefer the Asher method," she countered, her luminescence brightening with affection. Direct, personal, and effective. As their ship engaged its faster-than-light drive, propelling them toward their first assignment. Asher reflected on the journey that had brought them here. What had begun as a standard diplomatic mission had transformed not only two civilizations, but his own life. He had come to Aurelia Station to end a war. He had succeeded beyond anyone's expectations, not through traditional diplomacy, but by recognizing that underneath their alien appearances and customs, both species shared fundamental desires: to be understood, respected, and valued for what made them unique. That insight, that genuine peace required genuine understanding, would guide their work throughout the galaxy. And if a human anthropologist and a Zephyrian princess could bridge their differences to find love amid a 1,000-year war, perhaps there was hope for lasting peace among all sentient beings. As the stars streaked past their viewport, Asher and Liesel stood together, representatives of what was possible when fear gave way to curiosity, when judgment yielded to understanding, and when ancient enemies became not just allies, but family. The universe, vast and diverse as it was, suddenly seemed a little smaller, a little more connected, and infinitely more hopeful.